This is George Newbern, the voice of Superman, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Get charged up for action that'll shock your system.
Tell me that's not cool.
An unstoppable superhero and his crew embark on impossible missions and will bring mutated villains to justice.
When Static's in the house, bad guys better step off.
Pull the plug on crime with the adventures of Static Shock. Yeah!
Welcome, everybody, to episode 211 of the DCAU Review. I am Cal, and with me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. That's right, Liam. Liam, we are wrapping up. Hard to believe we've made it through May. June is knocking at our door, and but before we turn the page, we have one additional review staying in the sunny and sometimes red skies, as we learned to this week's episode of Dakota and Static Shock.
That's right, Callum. We have a pretty darn interesting episode to talk about. This completes our DCAU quadrilogy of Evil Twin episodes, I believe.
You pointed that out on social media this week. I didn't realize there were that many to pick from, but we could have done a whole month on this.
Yes. This is where hindsight becomes 2020 and all that. But yes, Static has to deal with his own evil twin, as we just suggested in the episode Replay.
That is right, Liam. And before we jump into our official synopsis for this week's episode, I will mention that this episode originally aired on the Kids WB here in the United States back on March the 3rd, 2001, meaning, yep, this is officially legal to drink in all 50 states of the U.S. here. 21 years old, just past the 21-year anniversary back in March. But Liam, as we get into this week's official IMDb synopsis, brought to you by The Pod Tower. That's right. Don't forget, check us out on The Pod Tower. Subscribe to that channel. Head on over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower. And not only can you get great content from us, our entire library, all up there in video form. It's not actual video form, but it's videos with audio. So if you consume your podcast that way, it's a great way to do so. Subscribe to it. That supports us, and it supports our fellow DCAU content creators that are also featured on the channel.
Absolutely, Cal. And so a little bit of an addendum to this. The IMDb synopsis for this week is wrong. Part of the synopsis addresses this episode. The rest of it appears to address the plot of a different Static Shock episode.
I'm here for this.
So should I read both still, or should I cut it off at the replay?
Absolutely, you should.
All right. So here's what the lovely IMDb synopsis, what the official IMDb synopsis says for this episode Replay, which was written by Len Yulee and Brooks Wachtell, directed by Dennis Cowan, with music by Stanley Clark and animation by Coco. And that synopsis reads as such. Static's latest nemesis, Replay, can create energy clones of himself. During battle, Sharon becomes suspicious that Virgil and Static are the same. During battle, Sharon becomes suspicious that Virgil and Static are the same and decides to prove her theory correct.
Yeah, I think that's the synopsis for Brother Sister Act. Definitely not Replay. This one gets a failing grade. This would definitely get a see me after class. Top of the page.
Not only did you not read the book, you didn't even read the Wikipedia entry on the topic correctly. So
you copied the pages were stuck together, and you copied the synopsis that somebody else had pasted into the book, or you just Googled something when you were half asleep and just pasted in. Yeah, that's a fail grade.
That's a big old. The first part of that sentence is, as we begin to break into plot, is that we get a new metahuman, and we start off where lots of episodes of Static Shock, I feel like more than I ever realized until maybe this month, we're in this mall a lot. Dakota Mall, a very popular supervillain destination.
Lots of stuff to steal, and we actually get the origins this week of the Dakota Mall.
Great mall, huh?
It's okay. Still no kid circus, though.
Kid circus?
Oh, yeah, an amusement park we went to when we were kids. There's still a little bit of it left behind the parking structure.
Oh, it's like they paved over a piece of your childhood.
Oh, well.
C'est la vie.
What is it? A fire?
No, a robbery.
That's right. As we kick it off with first, we see this mysterious person that we come to find out is our villain of the piece, the aforementioned Replay, or Johnny, as I believe his actual first name is. But he is in a jewelry store in the mall, sort of looking over a watch, and sort of the guy working behind the counter is explaining it to him, but he quickly notices that this guy looks familiar to him, and it's made very clear that he was in fact this former child star, and he introduces himself as Johnny Morrow, who
from Johnny on the Spot.
That's right. This apparently a national television show that we find out was apparently filmed in Dakota. So,
man,
the Hollywood of the Midwest. I don't know what, like, is this Detroit? Like, what city is this supposed like?
I don't.
Standard for?
I have no idea, and I'm not. I'll be honest with you. I was very distracted during this opening scene because the man showing Johnny the watch is Black Alfred.
I was gonna say that. It literally looks like you took the new Batman Adventures model for Alfred and gave him a very dark tan. And yes, he is African American or Black Alfred. Oh, man.
So funny.
May I help you, sir?
Tell me about that one.
Ah, yes, the Chronotech 2000. It's a timepiece, a pager, and a wireless internet browser.
What are you looking at?
Sorry, but you look familiar.
Well, duh. I'm Johnny Morrow.
I'm sorry. Who?
Little Johnny Morrow? I was 10 years old and I had my own TV series, Johnny on the Spot. My face was on t-shirts and lunchboxes. The whole country loved me. They wanted to talk like me, dress like me, be me.
And who could blame them?
Yeah. Then the network dumped me, and it all stopped. The limos, the fan clubs, the money, gone.
I see. Well, have a good day.
What are you doing?
Oh, well, you just said you don't have any money.
Who needs money? You're just going to give it to me.
Says who?
Says them.
But yeah,
so funny that we both put that in our notes. But yeah, so as this gentleman working behind the counter is, hearing Johnny sort of regale him with tales of his former fame, he certainly starts to think that maybe something's up, and that's when we see a person who looks just like Johnny attacks the person working behind the counter, and we quickly find out that he's not working alone. And before we can really see what happens in that jewelry store, we cut a few floors up to the food court where Virgil, Richie, and Daisy are hanging out, and they're discussing, as you mentioned, Cal, we get the origins of this mall, that there's this, used to be this theme park that was sort of torn down and abandoned, and you can even still see some of the wreckage behind it, which in the moment, I'm like, why are they talking about this? But there is a reason that we find out. It's because later on, Static chases Johnny into this wreckage of this theme park because they needed to have a hall of mirrors.
Well, that, and so many fans, so many people had been asking,
That's right.
where did the mall come from? That people were asking.
If we've heard that question once, we've heard it 1,000 times in our Instagram and Twitter.
Where did the Dakota Mall originate from?
We'll be doing a Dakota Mall character spotlight episode in our next.
Oh yes, coming in 2047.
That's right.
Get the Dakota
50 years from now, whenever now is that
right
coming.
Exactly.
But yes, as mentioned, Virgil, Richie, and Daisy are discussing this old torn down theme park, and that the mall is now sort of sitting on that property where this theme park used to be. And as they're discussing things, they hear an alarm go off, and they rush down to see what's going on. And it's clear that not only the jewelry store is being robbed, but several places, all who look exactly like this former child star Johnny. And as Static is able to feign some food poisoning to get away from Daisy and Richie and go suit up, he flies into action, and he's very quickly outnumbered as the replay clones are using golf balls. They're hitting golf balls at him, and they just sort of overwhelm him with the sheer numbers eventually, and things are looking bad. But Static is able to kind of turn things back around, and the clones run off with some of their ill-gotten gains, and Static's able to sort of follow one of them, and finally sees that they are leading them back to this Chekhov's abandoned theme park, as we find out, as Static sort of sneaks in, and we see the main replay speaking to his clone and yelling at him that did Static find him, and did Static follow him, and he gets so frustrated with him that he erases him, which confuses Static, because of course to this point in the episode we don't quite know what this metahuman's powers are, and so Static is very very concerned. But we quickly get our little bit of exposition from Johnny, as he tells us that he creates energized duplicates of himself. He's Multiple Man from the X-Men. That's basically what he is.
Yep.
Look, it's a simple question. Did Static follow you or not? Dunno. You know what? You make me embarrassed to be me. In fact, get out of my sight. No! Whoa, what is with you, man? See, I told you. The idiot led Static right to us. Hey, forget that. You just wiped out your own brother. My what? Static. Babe, wake up and smell the croissants. They're duplicates. Energy clones. Made them all by myself.
You're a metahuman.
Duh.
Wait a sec. Don't I know you?
Well, I did have my own TV show when I was 10.
Oh, yeah. What's his name?
Johnny Morrow. But you can call me Replay.
Which one of you is real?
Me. No, me. I am.
And they sort of again try to overwhelm Static with sheer numbers of his clones, but Static's able to kind of pull out a couple tricks of his own to defeat them seemingly, and they sort of clash, and their energies meet in the middle, and there's this giant explosion, and Static comes to for a moment and seemingly sees a second Static get up and run away. But before he can kind of react to that, the wreckage of this already sort of decaying theme park crashes down and knocks him unconscious. And we're in for sort of a rude awakening as Richie and Daisy sort of begin to speak about how they're concerned for Virgil. And Daisy, I actually thought was very funny that she points out that Virgil just does this all the time. He just leaves and then doesn't come back. It's just super normal. Whereas Richie thinks he's been gone for so long that it doesn't even make sense, even knowing that Virgil is really Static. So I thought that was kind of a clever bit of a dialogue there. But yes, so as they're beginning to talk outside of the mall, they see some police officers and reporters and such pull up, and just then they see Static flying by, and it seems like all is right in the world until it's not.
Yeah, when it goes bad, it's really bad. And in this case, for poor Virgil, who's still unconscious at this point, it's about to get real bad. And we'll say that in their dialogue as they were tussling in the House of Mirrors, Johnny did mention that that once people turn on Static, that he'll see how bad it is. And clearly this is his motivation still comes from being a forgotten, canceled star of the silver screen's the movies. What screen is the TV screen? What screen is bronze screen? Plastic screen? TV screen? Somebody tweet us the answer.
That's our action item for this week.
Find out which screen the TV screen is. Got it.
That's our engagement farming for this week. We're gonna put that post up on Instagram. Tell us what kind of screen the television screen is.
There we go. But yes, so he did reveal his motivation. Clearly, he's quite upset that he's been forgotten and that he was fired or that he was let go of his job after his TV show was canceled. So during this time, as you mentioned, Static appears and it's cheers and hoorays, but then Static does something a little bit out of character as he decides to dispense all of the money from the ATMs in the area and steal it. So immediately, I love this. I love just the absolutely insanity of this episode, the insane nature in which people behave in cartoons. Everyone immediately believes that this Static has just decided to go rogue. All of the bad or all the good is completely washed away. And honestly, it's not a bad metaphor for us as a society. We live in a society, you see, where one bad day can truly define your entire life. And people were ready to believe, apparently, that Static had turned rogue. So in that, Static eventually wakes up and believes maybe seeing this doppelganger was a dream or something in the House of Mirrors that he saw. In the midst of a Static doppelganger stealing all of the money out of the ATMs, Richie approaches him and it begins to try and talk sense into him, only for the doppelganger Static to pick him up and Static cling him essentially to a billboard and hold him there. So we get a flashback to Virgil's house as he's worse for wear, sitting at the table with Robert and Sharon, and they begin to tell him about the bad news, and he's clearly out of it. They flip on the TV, and just by accident, the TV happens to be in the middle of the hottest story of the day, which apparently is that Static has gone rogue.
Ooh, you look like you were hit by a ton of bricks.
Yeah, I've had better days.
You're not the only one. The whole city seems depressed.
About what?
About Static turning outlaw.
Say what?
Which has left all of Dakota City in shock. Local law enforcement could only stand and watch as Static struck throughout the city. In a related development, Chief of Police Barnesdale has announced...
This isn't happening.
I know. I can't believe it either.
It's a shame. He was such a nice young man.
He was. I mean, he is.
To think he had his food all this time, even me.
Static is absolutely shocked. So at this point, he's quite upset, and we see that Static has actually, the Static doppelganger has made yet another appearance in the middle of this news conference that Chief Barnesdale has called. He's announced that he's starting this anti-metahuman task force, complete with non-lethal weapons. But he's going to set out this task force to apprehend all metahumans, including Static, who's been added to the list at this point. The Static doppelganger interrupts the news conference by starting another crime. So the chief excuses himself and immediately deploys this very ready to go task force.
And I was just going to say, if you're one of the actual supervillains that's already attacked Dakota, this is, I believe, this is one of the last episodes of the season, of the first season. Don't you feel a little insulted that he didn't roll this out until Static went bad? Because like we've seen our Ebons, Hot Streaks, Talon, Shiv, like all these big, these big bads that Static's had to deal with. Carmendillo, of course, all the big ones. Like, aren't you a little bit insulted if it took Static going bad for the chief of police to make an entirely you-focused task force?
Absolutely, yes. I guess the final straw was that the one metahuman that was on our side is no longer on our side, so we can no longer send out a metahuman out there. So now we must defend ourselves. Seems like a bad strategy, but what else? What else can you expect from people that are in charge these days? Am I right? Moving on. So Static decides to go out because he's watching and decides he's going to go try and stop the crime spree from happening, and he arrives too late. The static doppelganger escapes, but of course, they don't know that there's a doppelganger, so he's public enemy number one, and the task force attempts to take Static down. He, after narrowly escaping through the sewers, he attempts to get in touch with Richie, and that kind of leads us to our next little spot, as Richie lets him know that he, like everybody else, is quite ready to believe that Static has A, gone crazy, and B, is no longer welcome at his house. He believes that he's truly gone rogue at this point.
Go away!
Come on, Rich. I've been calling you for an hour. Let me in.
No, thanks. I don't want to spend the rest of the night stuck to my ceiling.
You don't think I did that to you, do you? I said...
I heard what you said. Look, how do you know it wasn't you?
I'm not following you.
All the other metahumans are criminals. Maybe it just took you longer to go wacko. Maybe you have a split personality.
Wait a sec. That's it. I chased Replay to the funhouse, right? We fought. There was this big explosion.
So, you got hit on the head?
No. Well, yeah, but that's not the point. Before I passed out, I swear I saw someone who looked just like me.
Uh-huh.
I thought it was just my reflection in a mirror, but now I'm not sure. Call me crazy, but maybe Replay somehow cloned me.
You're right, bro. You're crazy.
We did get a minor sort of story bridge here where we see Johnny gloating that his doppelganger has successfully stolen all of this money and continues to ruin Static's life on top of it. He attempts to unmask Static, but we get our episode defining difference between here, spot the difference, kids, between who the real Static is and who isn't, as he pulls Static's mask off only to have this white noise effect underneath, which I thought was kind of cool. We'll talk about that in visuals. But yeah, so he leaves Static's mask off, so he kind of has this white noise effect across his face. And he actually reaches in his pocket and he pulls out. Now, this is where I don't understand. So the mask, there's nothing under the mask, but there's a physical shock box in his pocket.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because ideally the static under the mask, the static, pun very much intended, under the mask makes sense because he only cloned what he saw. He doesn't know what Static looks like under the mask, so he couldn't clone Virgil's entire face. But it's like somehow not seeing the shock box, he created a perfect duplicate of it. Not only a duplicate of it, it works because he then immediately uses it to call Static on the shock box.
Yeah, that's pretty hilarious. This unfortunately ultimately is his undoing, as Static figures that if it works as a walkie-talkie, that he might be able to turn it into a one-way listening device. So he returns to Richie in an attempt to plead with Richie to help him out. Richie is still very apprehensive towards Static, but Static swears that he hasn't gone rogue and that everything is just not what it seems. So he asks and begs Gear to assist him. Together, the two of them are able to get to the bottom of it and are able to reverse the polarity, as they used to say. So able to make this shock box function as an intercom system. So he's able to listen in, and it's this point that Gear finally believes and hears, because Johnny, of course, is expositioning at this point about how he's set Static up. So what else would you be doing if you were in a room full of your own clones, but gloating and talking about how great it is that you ruined Static's life?
This should be working, but all I'm getting is noise.
Let me listen.
So now you know my plan, boys.
It's Replay.
No money this time. Just revenge. Those idiots ruined my life. Now I'm gonna ruin theirs. You all know what to do, so let's do it!
course, that's the undoing of every villain this way is always his need to expositionize or expose.
Yes,
something exposit. The word is exposit. Anywho, they we get to our big finale in the studio, which kind of sets up a fun final fight. Again, we'll get to that in voice acting, but yes, Richie is able to make it inside the studio. He follows Virgil to the studio, and when he turns on the camera and sees him, he realizes that Virgil's telling the truth and activates a robot like remote control camera.
Yeah,
that follows and broadcasts it. Not just, and there's a nice big red button, as there always is in things like this, that makes it broadcast live to the entire nation, apparently.
Of course.
So Richie hits that button, so everybody, including all of the police standing outside the studio, are then alerted to the fact that there are in fact two statics. There is an evil doppelganger, and that leads to maybe my favorite quote in any show we've ever done, which is when the police chief says, "All right, men, let's go in there and get that actor."
There is an evil twin. Camera controls, on-air override. Hope this works.
So how's it feel, babe, now that nobody likes you anymore? Ready to move in, sir?
Wait.
That's little Johnny Morrow. I used to watch his show.
It's their fault. They ruined my life. Get over it, man. You're gonna trash the whole building just because they canceled your show? Yes. And the beauty part is, when we're through, the whole world will think you did it.
Okay, gentlemen, let's go in there and get that actor.
Now it's time to cancel you, Static.
You sure you want to do that?
On national television?
I'm on TV again?
Incredible. We'll talk more about it in voice acting, but the police chief was a lot of fun in this episode.
Agreed.
But yes, that leads us to our final fight, and Static is still a little bit overwhelmed by not only having to deal with Replay, but with his own evil clone, so to speak. But finally, he's able to overwhelm and overpower, thanks to a little bit of a distraction. Johnny notices that he's on camera, and at first he's so in awe and so happy that he's finally achieved his dream to get back a little bit of his fame, before realizing that if he is on camera, that means that everyone knows that he is the true mastermind behind this evil Static plot. And before he can really react, the real Static is able to throw the clone into Jimmy and electrocute both of them, which causes Jimmy's powers seemingly to short circuit, and all of his clones, including the evil Static, disappear just as the metahuman task force bursts in. And that's we get a nice little bow on the episode as Virgil and Richie kind of have a little bit of a heart-to-heart at the end and discuss things a little bit more. And we have our happy ending there, as there's all is back right in the world, and Virgil and Richie have made up, and Static's good name has been restored.
V,
Sure I'm not the evil twin?
oh yeah, the twin's better looking.
When I asked for your help with the shock box, you had your doubts, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Then why'd you help?
I just went with my gut, and that was the right call.
Speaking of guts, how about some cheesesteaks? On me?
On you? Excuse me, you're buying? Maybe you're the clone after all.
Thank God. And we get a little bit of fun as Static offers to treat Richie to some food, and Richie says, "Maybe you are the doppelganger." What a way to end it. Yeah. Liam, as much as this episode has a lot of, boy, isn't that happenstance, or boy, that's a lot of exposition, or, boy, these people were really quick to jump to believe that Static was not a good person, or including Richie, his best friend. As much of that I don't think is great, and that probably affected my score by a couple points. I really enjoyed this episode. It's a lot of fun. Maybe it's just the classic doppelganger evil twin storyline. It's effective and it works, and there's a reason why most cartoons at some point will revert to that storytelling device, because it works. It's fun visuals. You get two of the same character on the screen. Usually get those characters interacting with themselves. You get to see what would happen if they went up against themselves. It's a lot of fun. So the fact that we get some of that, and the replay character, although I kind of feel like would have been a little bit more interesting just to see Static go up against him as opposed to a replicated version of Static, and to see how he dealt with this person that can seemingly multiply himself into numerous people. I still think it was a lot of fun, and it was definitely an enjoyable 22 minutes. So I ended up giving plot a 7 out of 10. What about you?
Yes, I ended up giving it the exact same score of a 7 out of 10 as well. Pretty much all the reasons you mentioned. It is a whole bunch of fun. We'll certainly talk about the visuals and the voice acting and things like that later that sort of enhance this. But yeah, as a plot, it's like we talked about earlier. Every show, including every DCAU show, seemingly had to do some sort of a slant on the evil twin idea, and this one is a lot of fun as well. And to see Static kind of at odds with the whole city, you see civilians throwing eggs at him, and the cops are after him, and even his best friend doesn't believe him. It feels like real desperate for him, and that in the end, this fame hound villain is so in love with himself, idea that he'll become a star again, that his pride and hubris is his own undoing, and that's always a good little satisfying end to an episode of Static. So yeah, overall I think not the greatest of all time. We pointed out there's some real silly stuff and some things that don't really quite make sense if you think about it too hard, but overall still a very good time.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different play than we have similar plot threads in the Baby Doll episode of Batman the Animated Series, which we haven't discussed yet, but like the price of fame, and once you're a child actor and you're over the hill and forgotten and all of that stuff, and the real life things that a lot of child actors end up going through and the troubles that they have afterwards. But this one I feel like was definitely played for more laughs than it was for that darker edge that the Baby Doll episode has, from my recollection. But yeah, it's a plot that works. There are different aspects outside of that work really well. So yeah, I think as far as execution is concerned, this is a pretty good one.
Agreed.
All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, and that is going to be visuals and animation. So I believe I saw Coco is responsible for the animation. At least they were listed as the animation for this week. I will say, so yeah, the first thing that I noticed was the character model of Alfred in that first scene. That we mentioned in the plot. That was
Alfred, if you will.
Exactly. I enjoyed that. That was it was also somewhat distracting for that entire scene, but I was like, oh, so this is what it would look like if they put Alfred in the Static series. But yeah, what stood out for you as far as visuals and animation go for the entire episode?
Well, my first thing is the design for our villain of the piece. He's just in like a purple sweatshirt and blue jeans, and I thought maybe by the end he'd have like some sort of like more akin to a supervillain outfit, but no, he's just rocking the purple sweater throughout this whole thing. So he has like this very, I think, unique look among Static's bad guys, maybe because he isn't either an animal or doesn't have like a wacky costume or something. So I thought that was kind of fun. And then
kind of reminded me, in the face and hair reminded me of Fry from Futurama a little bit.
Ooh, yeah, good call. Definitely.
The red hair. He's kind of got that lurchy face, like hanging towards the bottom there. I don't know. I thought maybe, like, in my mind's eye, it was like, does Fry wear purple? He doesn't, but it's like, okay, just in the face.
Oh yeah, I see it. I totally see it. But yeah, I liked that design, and then I think that's some of the most fun. That first fight that Static and he have in the mall, where, as we mentioned, they're like shooting golf balls at him, and then they like three of them grab a bench in the mall and are like running it at Static like it's a battering ram, and he zaps it and kind of sends it flying, and they go flying with it. Like they did I thought some pretty creative stuff. And then in the aforementioned abandoned amusement park, I like that the backgrounds and stuff in there are really cool. The Hall of Mirrors is always like a cool superhero fight destination, and I thought that was cool. And the bit where they sort of they sort of go, they sort of grab hands, for lack of a better term. They sort of put Static's power against his power, and there's this bright flash of light, and then the big explosion and everything. I thought that was a really cool sequence, and the way they kind of framed and animated when the doppelganger is first revealed, and Static sitting there, and at first they're sort of perfect mirror images to each other and you're not quite sure what you're looking at, but then you do see the other Static get up and run away, and really before you even have a chance to, you see the building start to collapse, and we fade to black, and we cut to our next scene, and Richie getting Static clinged to the billboard, and this slow pan out where he's like, oh, I can't believe you would do this to me, and then it pans out to three other people already being stuck there. I thought was really really funny. And there's a cute line from the cop on it, like, well, if it makes you feel better, he's had a lot of practice today, or something like that. Like, it's a very funny, and just the way that's shot and animated is very funny, where you get the sort of the drama of Static grabbing Richie and flying him up and sticking him to the thing, and then just kind of the very slow comedic pan out as you realize there's four other people stuck up there or whatever. I thought was really funny. So, and then I liked the environment for the final fight, like on the television sets where they're crashing through. Like there's like a living room that they're in, but then they crash into like an office set, and they're like flying through the walls. And I thought that was kind of a creative and unique finale. It's not just like a sewer or a street or the Dakota Mall.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, those were the majority of the notes that I had. I also notated the golf ball replicants shooting golf balls at him. I thought that was fun. Yeah, I think that the final scene being on a sitcom set was pretty great. I like that. Even if it was just a plot point for the episode, they were like, oh yeah, didn't they just build a new building with a giant television out in front of the building downtown? Oh yeah, that's the new studio. That's probably where he's headed. So I thought that would have been an interesting site to revisit. Obviously it was introduced late into the plot, so maybe having some fight happen in the outside because there's a fountain there and the giant TV, but having it inside was an okay choice as well. I also love the continued DCAU tradition of the inept SWAT team, who continued to just be terrible at their job. They didn't blow anything up by accident. They didn't shoot any missiles at near trucks full of gasoline or giant explosives, and shoot flares into rooms filled with explosives like we've seen in the past. But I do love that this task force that was just ready to go at like the drop of a hat just were terrible, absolutely terrible at their job. So that keeping that DCAU tradition alive there. But yeah, other than that, I think that while visuals were fun, I think having the static doppelganger and the white noise underneath of his mask, like I alluded to in the plot, it seems like in these shows you always have to do something to differentiate the doppelganger from the actual hero. We talked about that most recently when we had Jordan Gibson on for his Silicon Soul, which you can hear in the archives at DCAUreview.com. But they were some things that they did to the Hardak Batman. That way, when they were fighting, you could tell who was the robot and who was the actual Batman. So for this, having Static get the doppelganger get his mask removed was easier to differentiate between the two of them. And then in the final fight, having Johnny put on sunglasses as he left the apartment differentiated him from his doppelgangers as well. So I like those cute little things that you can always point to and go, oh, this is because they need to differentiate so that the viewer at home, be it an adult or a child, can tell who's the real one. But yeah, other than that, I didn't have too much other than I will say the last thing I loved Static's initial change of clothes in the mall bathroom. He goes into a bathroom stall, sort of a play on the classic Superman telephone booth. He just goes into a bathroom stall and comes as Virgil and then comes out as Static. And then he flies out of the room and you see a very confused gentleman leave his own stall, kind of wondering what that loud boom was. So I did enjoy that classic play on a Superman transformation there. But all of that considered, I ended up giving visuals and animation a 7 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just 1 point higher. I went 8 out of 10. I think this one's just super fun. Like I said, for all the reasons we've already touched about, the brief as it may be, the Static police fight, I also really enjoyed, where he's sort of using his powers to shield himself at first, and they sort of launch this bright lights at him and they shoot tear gas. We get the rare occasion where Static actually uses his big yellow goggles, and then him sort of flipping out of the fight by noticing the sewer grate and pulling it off, and then sort of floating down through the manhole and then pulling the grate back behind him. I thought that was a fun little sequence as well. So yeah, there's a lot of fun to be had here, and all the other flourishes we've already talked about, like the evil Static with the static behind his eyes and all that stuff is very, very cool as well.
Agreed. Let's move on to our next category, Liam, which is music. And I will be open and honest, not a ton of musical notes that I took down for this week, other than applause for the fact that there were no lyrics other than your classic Static Shock theme song. So I think there was a couple of effective uses of the Static theme. There was a couple of scene transition musical ditties that I notated, but other than that, I didn't really have anything that stuck out to me when it came to music. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think the time I noticed it the most when there wasn't any music. There's not really music when he goes into the fun house, the Hall of Mirrors or whatever, from really the moment that Replay is arguing with his first clone through when they sort of have their clash and the thing blows up. I guess they bring it to music once the explosion happens, but it's pretty silent. And then when Virgil sort of first comes to underneath the rubble, he sort of has that same it's sort of is laying out again. They don't really put it into too thick there. Yeah, the Static theme's always good. I don't know if we've ever mentioned it, but in these older episodes, at the end of the episode is always someone. I believe it's a lot of the times it's Dan Reba's hand sketching a character from the episode. Mm-hmm. I always like that little musical bit. I think it's just another part of maybe of the main season 1 Static theme, but I always like that little musical stinger they put there at the end. But yeah, I had very little to say about music other than that. Other than we mentioned the Static theme used a little bit and some of that other what you would expect from season 1 episodes. So I just went with the tried and true 5 out of 10. Nothing bad other than, like I said, I kind of noticed that it seemed to be laying out even more than usual in some of the action sequences. But yeah, there weren't many big noticeable things, but certainly nothing bad either.
Yeah, I agree. I gave it the same exact score, 5 out of 10. Nothing bad, especially when it comes to me. A 5 out of 10 sometimes is a win, I feel like, for Static. So 5 out of 10 for music from both of us. All right, Liam, let's move to our final category for this week, and that is going to be our voice acting. Not a huge cast, but we do have a couple of notable names that we shall recognize, not only from just being actors, but also from their past appearances in DCAU and other DC animation. Let's talk about this week's voice cast.
That's absolutely true. Of course, once again, we do in a minor role have Maria Canales-Pereira as the reporter, Shelley Sandoval. We of course briefly have Michelle Morgan as Sharon and Kevin Michael Richardson as Virgil's dad. Speaking of a man, I know we've talked about quite a few times on this show. It mostly in minor roles. This might be the most like meaty part he's gotten to date in something we've talked about. But Dennis Haysberg, who the Allstate insurance guy,
Right.
Are You in Good Hands, as well as
in Good Hands? Yeah,
that's right, and tons of other shows and
The President on 24.
Absolutely. So always fun to hear him pop up, and as mentioned, his delivery of "Let's go in there and get that actor," so funny.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know if this surpasses his appearance as Kilowog. That's a pretty
okay. Yeah, that's his other one.
But for the sake of this week's show, we'll say it's actually one of his biggest roles to date. But yeah, he's I don't know. I feel like this week he's a good voice actor. He definitely has a very recognizable voice. I don't know that this week's performance was his best, other than that line. That line was absolutely perfect, and I agree with you. I noted that as soon as he said it. I was like, that is so funny. For no reason is that line funny. But yes, it's sort of a very dry performance. Like he has a very unique voice, and there is some dryness in the way that he does deliver his lines, even in his actual, his live action performances. But it just felt like it was very undersold. And for being the police chief, I don't know, maybe it's just my bias to expect a more demonstrative or gregarious, I guess is the word, not gregarious, that's the shortstop. Gregarious, a more gregarious type of delivery or appearance for a police chief. But it was okay. It's great because it's recognizable, and I think that one line stands out as being the defining line for this character for this episode for sure.
Absolutely. And elsewhere in our cast, of course, we have Crystal Scales as Daisy briefly. Again, I liked her and Jason Marsden as Richie, sort of playing off each other and talking, sort of explaining, and her explaining away that it's not weird that Virgil hasn't come back after like an hour, because he just disappears on her all the time, and her realizing that but not quite putting together why Richie is so concerned, I think is great. And then, as mentioned, I think there's some good comedy with Richie when Virgil goes up to his house and is knocking on the door, and and Richie won't even like open the door and everything. There's some pretty funny lines from Jason Marsden as Richie and Crystal Scales as Daisy in this week's episode too.
Yeah, I agree. There's a fine supporting cast, and coming off a week where we were really complimentary of Richie's work and Mr. Marsden's work, this week definitely has a lot less to do. Certainly not as much of a focal point, but he does get to kind of play a pivotal role in that final scene of exposing the Johnny Morrow character. So, and he's back to sort of being a quip machine for the most part for this week's episode. So, all things considered, decent performances from both of them as well.
Agreed. And then, in addition to our main actor, we have our main guest star for this week, who we have talked about like at least a couple times on this show, and might have another one. If we ever cover the Music Meister episode of Batman the Brave and the Bold, we'll have another one to talk about. So more DC animation credits to this fella's name that you might expect. Neil Patrick Harris.
There you go.
Is playing the role.
Come on, say the line. Say the line.
Television's Neil Patrick Harris.
Thank you.
Is playing the role of Johnny / Replay in this episode, and this is interesting because as of the time that this would have been recorded and released, this is pre How I Met Your Mother Good Hair. Neil Patrick Harris. This is Doogie Howser and maybe the first Harold and Kumar had come out by this point.
All right.
Maybe. I don't even know if that's true or not. So like this is pre-superstar Neil Patrick Harris, but it is funny because he obviously has a very recognizable voice, and having himself a former child star play our villain who himself is a former child star. A brilliant bit of casting, and not the first time that we've seen an actor on one of these shows come in or be brought in by Andrea Romano and the producers on the show, to sort of have a little bit of art imitating life, as Neil himself was a former child star, and here he comes to play our villain, who is quite obsessed with his former fame.
Absolutely. I mean, it all started way back when with, you could argue, with Beware the Gray Ghost, with Adam West playing a bit of a washed up television star himself. And yeah, the tradition continues here. And as you mentioned, we've certainly talked about him. He played the role of Ray in the Legends episode. And I believe he also did Nightwing's voice in Under the Red Hood. Is that where?
Correct. Yeah.
So we've covered a few different performances from him before. I remember not loving his go as Nightwing. I think his go as Ray was excellent. I love that episode, so maybe that's painted by that. But I will say that this is another great performance from him. It didn't even connect in my mind until the credits rolled that this was him, and for him to put in a solid effort as an actor, playing a child star actor that's washed up, and again, as you mentioned before, his superstardom sort of took off again. His second life as an actor took off. It's pretty funny, and it's some great meta that happens there. He has some great lines. I love the opportunity he gets in that first scene. The first entire scene, by the way, very rare. I feel like we get a complete scene of exposition right off the bat, where he explains who he is to this guy holding the watch, and then he has further exposition after he's escaped and headed to the remnants of this fun area, this play area, and he's in there in the House of Mirrors talking to the different versions of himself. So we get more exposition. And then he goes up against Static. So obviously, with Phil Lamarr being the voice acting giant that he is, having a nemesis that can kind of hold their own is not all that easy to do, as we've talked about before. Sometimes the castings can be a swing and a miss when especially when juxtaposed against Mr. Lamarr's performances. But I'd say old NPH here kind of holds his own and does a fantastic job. I really enjoyed his performance, and that final scene where he has to react and recognize he finally got his wish to be back on television, only for his heart to break when he realizes that he's been exposed and that it's all going to come crashing down around him, quite literally. I think was a great flex of his acting chops. So I think an excellent performance from Mr. Patrick Harris here.
Yeah, totally agree. I think in that final scene he's fantastic. The scene where he calls Static on the shock box, I think he's just real slimy and sinister in that scene too. He's sort of going over how and bragging about how he's destroyed Static's reputation, and how his next target won't be about money. It's all going to be personal. Like there's a real kind of sinister, slimy edge to him throughout some of that scene. And then that sort of like genuine joy and astonishment when he realizes he's on TV is quite good as well. So yeah, very good job by Mr. Patrick Harris. And then you of course have we've talked about him a lot. We talk about him all the time because he's on all these shows, seemingly. Phil Lamarr back again this week as Static. And he, I guess, other than Neil Patrick Harris, he has the second most to do in this episode. He does get a little bit more, I think, throughout the second half of the episode. Once he's sort of put on or is made aware of the evil Static, and he's reacting to that, and then he's sort of pleading with the police chief not to come after him, that they have the wrong guy. And then after the police almost catch him and he escapes, we cut to him and he's just sort of sitting on this hill outside the city, and he's really down on himself, and he's so frustrated, and And then, I think he gets a little bit to do this week, and unsurprisingly, he does a very good job with it.
Yeah, I really liked the scene where after he's kind of figured out that he's been set up and there's this doppelganger and he's frustrated, where he sees the crime in progress on the television while he's at the restaurant, and the voiceover says that Static is struck again, and he stands up in the middle of the restaurant and exclaims, "He has not," or whatever he says, and has to show a little bit of anger and frustration, and even his interactions with Richie, where he's trying to plead with Richie to believe him that he hasn't, that this evil twin does exist, and for whatever reason Richie's character refuses to believe, even though he's seen all of these metahumans. Richie refuses to believe that there could possibly be a metahuman that somehow created a duplicate of Static, but sure. But yeah, so his frustration in that, and his sort of gentle pleading with Richie to help him to kind of hack the shock box, I loved that. But yeah, unsurprisingly, we've talked about it all month. We'll continue to talk about it every single time that he shows up. Mr. Phil Lamarr, voice acting legend, really, really, really good at his job.
Yeah, not surprising there, but yeah, like we said, for all the reasons we've mentioned, I actually settled on a pretty darn strong 9 out of 10 for my voice acting this week.
That's awesome. Yep, you can definitely tell that we are blood related and have similar thought processes this week. A quick reminder, in case we haven't talked about this in a while, we don't discuss our scores before we go on the air.
No, we do not.
But yeah, I also gave it a 9 out of 10 for that same exact reason. So strong week with some great supporting cast for Phil Lamarr, a great nemesis for him to go up against and to verbally spar with him, I felt like, for this week. So strong score from both of us on a fun week, a fun episode.
Absolutely.
All right, Liam, let's tally up our scores. Tallying up my scores, getting to the end here, I end up with a pretty decent 28 out of 40. What about you?
And as you mentioned, we had very similar scores across all of our categories. I do, thanks to I think one point difference in our visuals category, I have a final score of 29 out of 40. So yeah, pretty similar as things often are on this show.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, of course, now that we've given our scores, we're going to talk about rewatchability. Character replay doesn't show up again. We do get the origin story of the mall. So I do think that the argument could be made, the backstory of the mall. If you come into season 3 and the mall's there, and you're like, where did this mall come from? Like, you need this episode to figure out where the mall came from and how it came to be. The story of the mall and how it came to be. And so many jokes happening. So it's not overall, this does not have long-term value to the entire show here. There's not a lot of distrust that occurs or that sticks around with Static after this that you might have seen as a thread that could have made this feel like it was a more important story. Again, replay does not, I believe he's mentioned in one other episode, but you don't really see him again. So I'd say, despite all of the fun that I had this week, this is a skip.
Yeah, I think this is one where you enjoy it as 22 minutes of fun. If it's your first time through the series, sure, definitely give this one a watch. But when we talk about the rewatchabilities, the ones we and you, the listeners, might come back to again and again. Yeah, unfortunately, this one isn't high up on the list, despite being quite a bit of fun.
All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And don't forget, please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. And if that is Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, please give us a rating. We would love that. You can rate us on both of those. 5 stars would be much appreciated. And if it lets you leave a little paragraph or a little review and you feel inclined or feeling generous or you want to support us, that is a way to do so on Apple Podcasts. We always appreciate that. Additionally, as we already mentioned, you can subscribe to us on youtube.com/thepodtower. That helps us out. Not only does it help us out, but it also helps out our friends at the Watchtower Database and Tim Talk, who also put out a lot of great content, sort of DCAU and DCAU adjacent. So check out their stuff as well while you're on the Podtower. Of course, you can also support us if you would like to with a couple of dollars. You can head over to DCAUreview.com, click on the store tab, pick yourself up a piece of merch, or you can use the link at the bottom of the podcast here. You'll see an anchor link and you can support us that way. Liam, it's been a great week. We're talking all about this, of course, on our social medias, which is another opportunity to support us at DCAU Review, both on Twitter and Instagram. It's been a fun month. We will be bidding the sunny skies of Dakota adieu for now, though, and we're going to be shifting to a fun, exciting month that we have coming up here. Let's give a little preview for the month of June.
That is right, Cal. And as we like to do about once a year, we work in our non-main DCAU episodes here and there throughout the year. Usually if we have a fifth Saturday in a month, we usually put one in, but about once a year, we like to do a full month of Elseworlds reviews. And we are going to be going back to that concept next month, the month of June. And we've picked should be everybody's favorite characters. Maybe he's not, but we're going to be focusing on none other than the Boy Wonder himself, and specifically alternate non-DCAU animated versions of Robin himself.
Yeah, so this character has been around for quite a while, almost as long as the Dark Knight himself. So definitely worth discussing all of the various different versions of Robin. Obviously, we've only talked about one of the DCAU Robins at this point for what it's worth. I guess we did mention Tim a little bit when we reviewed Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. But
yes, and of course our bonus episodes, which covered all of the Robins in the Batman Adventures Continue seasons 1 and 2 reviews.
There you go, absolutely. So we've talked about Robin before on various episodes, but it's going to be a fun time to really set an entire month aside to discuss the Boy Wonder himself in various incarnations across animation. So I cannot wait to do that with you, Liam. That will kick off next month. But until then, I am Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.